The Tau Empire is not communist! Hello, Solarcross here, and in this video we will investigate if the Tau Empire of the Warhammer 40k universe are space communists. The answer, in a word, is no! If that is not good enough for you, if the objection, but my greater good, is right now reflexively exploding from your mouth, then what follows is the irrefutable argument as to why the Tau are not communists. Who claims the Tau are communist? Firstly, I would like to look at who it is amongst the 40k fandom that makes such a clearly spurious claim. I think there are two kinds of people who like to make the specious claim that the Tau are communists. One type is people who like communism and want to try to soften the ugly image of historical communism by associating it with the one faction in the fictional 40k setting that may be the least grimdark. For example, some quotes here. TL:*DR, you pretty much nailed it about it being a meme. They're mostly referred to as communist because of ignorance, but adored by us lefties probably because they're the most leftists faction in the game since they've established collectivists. And that was from Reddit. And there's another one which I found from Warhammer 40k fandom. Communism comes in different flavors. The Tau are a bit of a Soviet-era communism. We're all equal, except some of us are more equal than others. In fairness to those who like communism, there are some among them that recognise that the Tau are not communist, as seen in this thread from r/Marxism, a Reddit board for far left-leaning Warhammer fans. I quote, "Why do people call the Tau communist? I know it's a meme, but seriously, those guys aren't even trying to be socialist, much less a classless, post-scarcity society. The ethereal caste have control over all the other castes, who themselves are their tributaries, and the membership within a caste is hereditary. The other type is people who dislike the Tau and therefore want to claim they are communists by way of a slander. These people, for example, will tend to emphasize the brainwashing by Tau ethereals and liken that to the brainwashing by historical communists. A famous example of the latter type would be the YouTuber Arch. So what is their evidence? Evidence 4. So that is where the motivations come for making the claim. But what evidence is submitted to justify it? Well, there are just 3, and they are tenuous at best. Number 1. The Eastern Galactic Fringe, where the Tau Empire is located, is a spatial metaphor referencing the Cold War. The least of this evidence is that the Tau Empire is situated in the eastern fringe of the 40k galaxy. It has to be said that during the Cold War, the philosophical divide between freedom and communism was often presented using the spatial metaphor of East versus West. So, if the Tau location in the galaxy has a metaphorical meaning in it, then the artistic choice of putting them in the East could be a reference to the Cold War, and thus communism. Except the vibe of the Cold War was that the communist East was large, ominous, and equal in power to the West, even if inferior in other ways, such as human values. The vibe of the Tau is completely different, however. The Tau are not large and ominous to the Imperium of mankind. Indeed, they are a flea in comparison. The Tau are the plucky upstart, the new kid on the block, not the great and terrible adversary that the East represented during the Cold War. Moreover, East, as a broad spatial metaphor for a philosophical strain, has also been used in other times in history to reference the Dharmic religions of India and the Confucian traditions of the Far East. East alone does not narrow the Tau to a cipher for human communists. I do believe the authors of the Tau faction did indeed place the Tau in the eastern fringe of the galaxy as a reference to something in human history, but I will elaborate on that later. Number 2. The greater good. The main evidence presented that the Tau are communists is the philosophy propagated by the ethereal caste of the Tau, which is summarized by the motto, the greater good. There are a number of problems with this. Firstly, the greater good philosophy is extremely vague in itself, but seems to be very much a philosophy of altruism rather than collectivism in the specific way the communists mean it. Ayn Rand would not like it, I guess, but philosophies of altruism are actually very numerous. So it is not possible to say that the greater good could not be a reference to any of Christianity, Confucianism, nationalism, or even fascism rather than communism. Communism might also be classed as a philosophy of altruism, but yet it cannot be fairly said to be the only one. Moreover, communism purports to be a philosophy of discord. They claim to seek to stoke a war between the classes for the aim of proletariats upcoming to dominate and even destroy the other classes. Those who have read the Tao Law know that before the ethereals came to propagate their philosophy, the Tao were a practical people, very much given to warring among each other. They already had discord, but the ethereals persuaded the different Tao clans to work together peacefully. This approach is the literal opposite of how communists carry out their philosophy. It is the equivalent of the communists pleading for the working classes, the bourgeoisie and the landlords to all work together symbiotically, rather than inciting them to war on each other. We might also note that the ethereals, as the propagators of the greater good philosophy, aesthetically do not have a very Marxian vibe. Marxists tend to affect an academic or intellectual style, even pretending to be scientific, whereas the Tao ethereals have a more priestly, monkish or mystical vibe going for them. The philosophy of the ethereals could in fact be better understood as a religion rather than a philosophy. Thus, we would better to think of them as like the Brahmins of the Dharmic cultures or the Shinto priests of Japan. Number 3. Brainwashing. Finally, there is the claim made by those that dislike the Tao that the ethereals are like communists because they are into brainwashing. Well, again, even if we accept that the ethereals do indeed brainwash the other castes, brainwashing in itself is not unique to communists. Really, any propagated philosophy or religion or education could be viewed, rather darkly, as brainwashing. The ethereals' methods of brainwashing, however, do not resemble that of communists at all. For example, it does not appear that the ethereals use torture or terror to propagate their philosophy. Moreover, if brainwashing was a communist trait, then really almost all of the factions in 40k universe would be communists. Point of fact, the Imperium of Mankind literally employs political officers called commissars, which is directly lifted from Soviet history. Gene stealers do more than steal genes, they also control memes. If not commie, then what? To really cement why the Tau Empire are not space commies, I will now demonstrate exactly what in the real world they are derived from. And yes, of course, they are heavily derived from another source, just as most of Games Workshop's creations are. Likely you will already know the answer if you are aware of the other and actually correct Tau meme, that they are the Weeaboo faction. So, the evidence that the Tau are Space Japan. What follows now are 11 evidences that I, Solar Cross, present to you that the Tau are inspired by Japan, that they are indeed the Weeaboo faction. Number 1. Gundams and battlesuits. Probably the most accessible clue to Tau's Japanese roots are the Tau's heavy use of large mecha suits, such as the Broadside, Riptide, Ghost Keel, and Storm Surge. Loosely, we may define a mecha suit as a large humanoid war machine, usually piloted by a living person rather than an AI. Modern Japanese pop culture, at least from their 1980s, is fairly awash with such machines, as exemplified by the Gundam series. The boxy designs of Tau mechasuits clearly resembles that of the Gundams. Number 2. Rabbit ear antenna and monocular vision. Fire Warrior armor and mechasuits are distinguished by monocular eyepieces and rabbit ear-like antennae, a look that seems to be lifted from the cybernetic prosthetics of Briareus Hecatonachiris in the famous Japanese manga Appleseed. See here. Number 3. Fire Warrior armor fashion. Besides rabbit ears and monocular eyepieces, regular fire warriors sport slatted thigh armour, square shoulder armour, and tight-fitting calf hoses. A look that certainly seems lifted from classic samurai battle fashion. Number 4. The caste system. The Tau have a well-defined and seemingly quite rigid caste system. There are 5 castes and they are each associated with a mystical element. Earth, fire, water, air and spirit. Each has a distinctive symbiotic role to play in the wider enterprise of the species. Fire caste are warriors. Earth caste are workers and artisans. Water caste are merchants and diplomats. Air caste are pilots and messengers, while the ethereal are the monks and priests. The other famous period of Japanese history, besides the modern period of manga and high technology, is the medieval one of samurai and Shinto priests. In this period, the emerging class system was becoming really quite entrenched, almost to the point of becoming a caste system. The warrior caste of the Tau, the fire caste, then can be seen as a proxy for the samurai caste, just as the ethereals can be seen as proxies for the monks and priests of medieval Japan. Of course, the remainder of the people were workers, artisans and merchants. Number 5. Eastern mysticism. The Tao. Although it originated in ancient China, the notion of the Tao or the Tao was transmitted over the centuries to Japan, along with other cultural imports such as Buddhism, Zen Buddhism and the Chinese writing system. Tao can be roughly translated into English as the way. It is not hard to see that the name of the species and empire Tao or Tahao is derived from the name of this ancient mystical concept. Number 6. Rapid technological development. Japan managed to persist in an exquisitely medieval level of technology due to its geographic isolation until well into the 19th century. Then, by the early 20th century, their industrial, technological and scientific development was comparable to the most advanced powers in the world. And many might argue, by the latter part of the 20th century, that Japan had far exceeded them all. This incredibly fast pace of technological development has never been equalled. A blisteringly fast technological development rate is a hallmark of the Tao story too. It is said that the Tau went from crude gunpowder weapons to starships in a matter of a few millennia. Pace of development that astonishes and appalls the scholars of the old and stagnant powers like the Imperium of mankind. Number 7. Circular heraldry. A distinctive feature of Tau flags and heraldry, such as sept signs, are the ubiquitous use of circular designs. It may surprise you to know that this is also a feature of Japanese heraldry. See here. Number 8. Boshin War and Commander Farsight. In the Tau lore, their foremost firecaste leader, Commander Farsight, becomes disenchanted with the rule of the ethereal caste and goes into rebellion. A comparable thing happened in Japan's history with the Boshin War. The Boshin War was a civil war between the followers of the shogun, the foremost leader of the samurai class, and the followers of the emperor. The Japanese emperor's role is actually rather less like that of a Western emperor, in that he is less a military leader and more like a spiritual one. The Japanese emperor is perhaps more like a pope than a military dictator, as he symbolizes the soul of the nation. Thus, the split between Farsight and the ethereals has echoes in the split between the shogun and the imperial court, which precipitated the Boshin War. Number 9. The Eastern Galactic Fringe. As noted before, the Tau are physically located within the Warhammer 40k universe in a region of space called the Eastern Fringe. The notable characteristic of this region, besides being east, is that it is very remote and isolated from the main sway of the galaxy, populated by the Imperium. Japan, also known as the Land of the Rising Sun because of its position in the Far East, also had a physical isolation and distance from the West as a characteristic. That is, up until advances in naval technology connected the islands with the broader sweep of human civilization. Number 10. Fish of Fury. Tau vehicles are ubiquitously named after fish. Devilfish, hammerhead, barracuda, piranha, skyray, manta, orca, sunshark. It also so happens that fish are a food source of critical importance to Japan as a densely populated island nation. It is not for nothing that sushi is Japan's most famous cuisine. 11. Philosophy of war. Strategy, tactics and philosophy merge as one for the samurai, as seen in the Code of Bushido and the Hagakure. Of two philosophies of war for the Tao fire caste, the Monte-Ka and the Koyan, may be loose derivations. Why derive the Tao from Japan? It is no secret the Games Workshop's creators are perpetually lifting styles and stories from both other fiction and history to create their own IP. They have lifted from Tolkien, European history, Starship Troopers, Frank Herbert's Dune, and so much more. By the early 2000s, Japanese pop art, anime and manga had already quite well established fandoms in the West. It really could only be a matter of time before GW's culture raiders were to discover and exploit the rich treasure of material presented by Japanese history and pop culture. That it exists, is cool and appears to be popular is reason enough for GW to exploit it.
Well, if you enjoyed that, then why not like the likey button and check out this video here, where I look into the controversy of female representation in Warhammer 40k.